that's a massive conflation of these two very different things.
Why so?
Why?
Because
it's a mental health disorder. We don't affirm it. Why do we affirm this one?
Because
what if they don't even have their parental consent? What do you think about that?
I think the child should be in the driver's seat about who they are.
So I work for a child protective agency, and they are pushing the gender ideology, the gender expression. They're doing it with a cute little unicorn. And we have to ask all children over the age of 10 that come from abused and neglected homes that are already going through a lot of trauma, their gender expression, and their sexual orientation. I'm an old school Democrat, not anymore.
Right.
They've gone way too far.
Yeah.
They've gone way too, it's too much.
Huge shout out to our friends over at Allegiance Gold for sponsoring this video.
The question I was asking is, if children were to do this, does it have irreversible effects on them?
The answer is yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've read, puberty blockers are essentially entirely reversible aside from some minor differences with bone density. Puberty blockers are almost always used on teenagers or people who aren't from what I know, why would you use puberty blockers on people who are 5 years old if not doing puberty yet? They hit puberty around I think tweens and
9, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, well, yeah. But puberty blockers, I think we can all agree, puberty blockers are used for people with precocious puberty, on the label, right? Do you agree with that?
That's one of the purposes,
Correct,
but
I'll take this.
yeah. I did want to go back because I would love to hear you speak, and we're going to let you speak. But you did make one claim, which is that puberty blockers are reversible with no harm. Great, let's talk about it, Chris.
Okay, so yes, these have been approved for a condition called precocious puberty, which is where girls under the age of 8, boys under the age of 9 are hitting puberty. This is a medical condition, right? You don't want a 6-year-old starting her period necessarily.
I agree.
So I get it in that instance. I don't necessarily even agree with it still, because you're still giving a very serious drug to kids. But I understand in that case, okay? That's not what this is about.
Okay, yeah.
That's not what this is about at all.
Mm-hmm.
This is about perfectly healthy children who don't have that condition, who are now 10, 11, 12 years old, who have come to believe this lie that they were born in the wrong body.
Okay.
And that's a very negative message to be sending kids, that they need to be something that they're not. The body positive message we should be sending is that girls and boys are beautiful just as they are. There's no right way to be a boy or a girl, but we have all these kids today who have other mental health comorbidities going on. Almost half of these kids are on the autism spectrum who end up in these gender clinics. These are kids in state care. These are kids who suffered trauma and abuse and sexual abuse. And they're not being treated for these other comorbidities. They're just being treated as though gender is the underlying cause of all of their problems. And all the therapists and social workers do these days is simply affirm the child's own statement. It's not challenged. It's just whatever the kid says, that's what goes. We trust children to know what's best for them. That's the line of thinking. And as any parent could attest, that's totally nuts.
It makes sense to me why it's become a possible solution, but I can understand concern because, it's obviously a hormone and it changes,
So the puberty blocker itself is not a hormone. It actually stops the body from producing its own hormones.
Yeah, okay.
So the technical term, they're gonadotropin releasing hormone agonists.
Yeah.
So they would stop you from producing estrogen.
Yeah.
So then your body wouldn't develop.
Yeah.
The reversible claim, this is essentially a sales pitch that's used. And sure, it's true that if you put a kid on puberty blockers for 3 months, let's say, and took them off, yes, puberty is going to resume. That's what they mean when they say these are reversible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the whole point they're giving these kids these drugs in the first place is because these children want to be the opposite sex. So the theory behind the puberty blockers is they want to keep these kids looking as neutral as possible.
Exactly. So they don't go through a male puberty if they want to transition to being a woman later on.
Right. It would apparently be too traumatic for a boy to start developing into a man.
Excuse me, ladies, thumbs up or thumbs down on this sign?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Seems pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that should be illegal.
That's illegal.
What?
It's not illegal, but it should be.
Yeah.
How is it not illegal?
Because it's not.
I think all of it is. I think
You think this is stupid?
Yeah, I mean, look at this.
So you think that they can consent to puberty blockers?
Okay, I'm just gonna say this is stupid that you guys are walking.
Wait, why?
But you want to sterilize kids? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I just want people to do what they want to do.
Including sterilizing 12-year-olds?
I think you can suck my.
You have common sense. You agree that we should not be giving children puberty blockers.
Amen.
I asked if you have kids,
I have 4.
and are they in the public school system?
Hell no. Especially California.
Bro.
Protect your kids. Private school. They give us no other choice.
Do you disagree with that?
I do disagree with that. What else can they not consent to? I mean, think about it. Can they consent to going
They can't
to
consent
to
to having sex
school?
with an adult. They can't consent
They
to.
can't
They're not allowed to
consent.
drink alcohol, smoke
So
cigarettes.
you agree with this message?
No,
Oh, you don't?
I do not.
You think if a 10-year-old says, I want to block puberty and become infertile, that's fine?
I think they and their parents should make that decision together.
What if they don't even have their parental consent? What do you think about that? Because they don't need it in California.
Just all get rid of all of it?
I think the child should be in the driver's seat about who they are.
So you think girls
And
can be boys?
Have a good day.
How does that work? Do you have any idea how a girl can be a boy?
You know, and doctors in California, I don't even think can say, you know, no, honey, I think you should wait. They can't even say anything. It's beyond repulsive and cruel. It's going to come back where, you know, Mom, Dad, you let me down.
All right, you guys, let's take a few moments to talk about today's sponsor. One thing the media is really good at is distracting you away from things that you should actually be focused on while they're telling you how great things are under Biden. China, Russia, Brazil, India, and South Africa, basically half the world's population, created BRICS, which is a massive economic alliance poised to replace the dollar with their own currency. The consequences of this could obviously be dire, so it's important to ask yourself if you are prepared or if you're gambling with your financial future. This is why many of my viewers have invested in the one thing that has been proven stable for centuries, gold, from my friends over at Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold has earned the highest trust ratings in the precious metals industry. I've been working with them for well over a year now, you guys. Their relationships are based on integrity, expertise, and impeccable service. Go to protectwithklug.com today or call 866-335-KLUG. And you guys, right now, you can get up to $5,000 in free silver on a qualifying purchase. Don't get fooled by inflated stock values or the promise that the economy is stable. You guys, protect your financial future today. Visit protectwithklug.com. That is protectwithklug.com or call 866-335-KLUG. Thank you so much to Allegiance Gold for continuing to sponsor these videos. Let's get back into it.
There are side effects, serious side effects to this. This is a harsh drug. For women with endometriosis, they're usually told not to take it for more than 6 months because the side effects are so severe.
Yeah.
There's bone loss is one of the side effects. They did a study with sheep because they've never done these studies with kids. They're totally experimenting on them. But the study with sheep showed that there was cognitive decline. We have no idea what the lack of their own hormones are doing to their developing brains.
It's very valid.
And we're playing God with children's bodies, you know?
Yeah.
Or we're messing with how we
I
evolved.
think, obviously, like for me, like with the whole like transgender thing, I think we just really need to like, obviously, like I can't snap my fingers and have this happen, but like the concept of gender and gender roles is just really damaging, and I think it has caused a lot of this like controversy.
We were talking about that.
I think with like
I wasn't expecting her to go that direction.
Yeah. The next step always is the opposite sex's hormones, because these children have already completely committed to this idea that they need to transition to the opposite sex, which is, of course, is an impossibility. This is body modification, that's all it is. But in 98% of cases, the children who start on puberty blockers, according to Gender Clinic's own statistics, they progress to the cross-sex hormones.
Okay.
These drugs and hormones together are sterilizing kids. A lot of people don't believe me, but you can read the consent forms that these children sign at all these gender clinics. It's right on there. If you put a girl on puberty blockers from 11 to 16, she doesn't get to go back to 11 anymore, where she's going to go through puberty. Those years of development are gone. Her breasts aren't going to grow.
Do you have any
Boys'
evidence for that?
penises don't grow. Yes, absolutely. All these boys, you can read all the material from the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, for example. So they write the standards of care. They're on their 8th version of the standards of care. Go to wpath.org, I think it is.
Okay.
The president is Marcy Bowers. This is a trans-identified male who will freely admit that all these boys end up with a micropenis for life. After 4 or 5 years on testosterone, for example, these girls have to get hysterectomies because it causes vaginal and uterine atrophy. Sometimes they're cutting out their ovaries as well. It's called a bilateral oophorectomy. So now these girls or young women can never produce estrogen for the rest of their life. And guess what? They're getting to 20 years of age, 25, and they're going, what the heck did you do to me? I was struggling. I was depressed. I'd been sexually abused. A lot of girls who've been sexually abused don't want to be a girl. Makes sense. I don't have to be a girl to understand that. This is an escape for them.
Do you think that you would be mentally capable of making a decision like that when you were 12 or 13?
Because I don't even know about those type of topics at that age. I can't make a decision like that. So I'm gonna have to agree with this. Like, I mean,
It's a common sense. The overwhelming majority of people agree with this.
More than 90% of people agree with this. Like,
Yeah.
enthusiastically agree.
So you said, where do you work?
So I work for a child protective agency, and they are pushing the gender ideology, the gender expression. They're doing it with a cute little unicorn, and we have to ask all children over the age of 10 that come from abused and neglected homes that are already going through a lot of trauma, their gender identity, their gender expression, and their sexual orientation, 10 years and above.
So you work
That's
for
the agenda.
CPS?
Yes, a Child Protective Services Agency.
And what's your role with them?
Oh, I'm up there.
You're up there. So that is a systemic push of radical gender theory.
Radical, yes. It's state of California.
You said 10 and up.
10 and up.
So is this a procedural requirement now that when I'll just wait for that motorcycle to go by. This is a procedural requirement now that when a 10-year-old comes into CPS, what do you call the person who first sees them? The intake coordinator?
Children's social worker.
Okay, the social worker is required to ask them what their gender identity is.
And their gender expression and their sexual orientation.
And their sexual orientation.
At 10.
10-year-olds go into CPS, the social worker has to ask them what their sexual orientation and gender identity is in the state of California.
Yep, even if they're home with their parents.
How do these conversations go?
Honestly, I'm not in the field, so I can't tell you how those conversations go. I can tell you, though, that the people asking the questions are very uncomfortable with it. I don't
Really?
think that we should be having conversations about gender and sex with children.
Obviously.
It seems like a common sense thing to say right there.
Correct. We should not be talking about children's sexual orientation when they're 10 years old.
Or their gender
because they're little
expression or their
kids.
gender identity.
Well, it's also pretending that this is really the thing, right? It's pretending that the ideology is fact and not a belief system that not everybody subscribes to, right?
If a child or a person or someone was questioning their sexuality or their identity, what would you say to that? So I apologize.
So this isn't about sexuality.
But it's about
And
identity, don't you think?
It's about identity. So
Okay.
it's about gender identity.
Okay.
Now, I never attach sexuality to children. I don't call them gay, I don't call them straight.
Because they're children.
They're children.
There shouldn't be sexuality attached to children in
Correct.
general.
My statement would be that there's no such thing as a transgender child. They're called girls and boys, and they're beautiful just as they are. The body positive message we should be sending is that there's no right way to be a boy or a girl.
Right.
That if this little girl doesn't conform to regressive sexist stereotypes, if she's a tomboy and wants to climb trees and play in the dirt and throw around a football, well, we have a word for that. She's called a beautiful girl.
Okay.
She's not a boy. There's no such thing as being born in the wrong body. And for the first time in human history, we're now giving kids pharmaceutical drugs and the opposite sex hormones in an attempt to make them the opposite sex.
Right.
What? You'll know about this bill. Any 12-year-old now can just say they want to leave home. They can make up whatever, and the state of California will now shelter them without their parents' consent.
So there's that one, but there's also the one that he vetoed, right? Because
Yeah.
he's trying to appear as a moderate, where
Right.
the
You're talking about the divorce when it comes
Divorce,
to custody.
yeah, the custody
so basically,
thing.
if
Right.
there's one parent that's denying a
Right,
child's
they can't
gender identity, quote
intervene,
unquote,
yeah.
that could interfere
Yeah,
with
so now we're
their
going to be a
custody battle.
sanctuary. We're going to be a sanctuary state for illegal immigration and gender ideology.
Already
right?
are.
Yeah, it's
It-
terrible. I'm an old school Democrat, not anymore.
Right.
They've gone way too far.
Yeah.
They've gone way too. It's too much.
Let's say you look at this information, you confirm what he's talking about, because we're not here to lie to people. We're really quick. Would that change your mind about saying that it's not doing any damage? Did you hear about the list that he just talked about? What do you think about that?
No, like
honest opinion.
Because like I do understand what you're saying, that like if like you have like if you like delay the puberty, they might not like have like as much like growth of the penis, they might not have as much growth of like the breasts of like their woman and all this stuff, and I get that. But at the same time, from what I've researched, and you can fact check me if I'm wrong, like the regret rate for gender affirming care, the regret rate for, because like you mentioned, like 98% of people who start on like puberty blockers end up pursuing further gender affirming care. The regret rate for this is about at the rate of like other surgeries like knee replacements or hip replacements, to the point where I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about any of this stuff, if like these people are going on this path and they don't regret it later in life, and you can try to say stuff like, for instance, like, oh, if they like end up at a later stage not like vibing with the gender affirming or like with the puberty blockers, then they get like a micro penis and like I understand what you're saying, but at the same time I feel like the like when like I
can address that.
And like
we can do one point at a time if you want.
Yeah, let's talk about definitely the regret.
Yeah, go for regret.
So first of all, there are no studies, period. No proper studies into this with kids. There's never been a randomized control trial. You can't really do it because
well, you can like
one group would be having puberty blockers, the other group would be going through puberty. They would obviously know that they didn't receive the actual puberty blockers.
But like let's be real.
I don't want to get sidetracked. So let me answer your question. We know historically with gender dysphoria, and that's how we should frame this, okay? I don't call them trans kids. They're just boys and girls who are struggling with distress.
Okay.
We know historically children with gender dysphoria, back before this craze that really took off, really starting in about 2015. But historically, going back decades, this affected 1 out of tens of thousands of children, mostly boys. And if you look at all the historical studies that were done before they started giving kids puberty blockers, more than 80% of the time, kids with severe gender dysphoria from a young age just grew out of it. The most recent study that was done followed 139 boys from the age of 5 all the way into their 20s. 87.8% of them grew out of it, and a majority, and this is the really interesting part, 63.6% grew up to be gay. So what this is doing is taking these, in this case, these little boys, these effeminate little boys who wanted to be girls, well, leave them alone, and they're just going to grow out of it, and they're going to be happy gay men. But today what's happening is these same kids are being told, oh no, you're really trans. You were born wrong. You should have been a girl. That is psychologically abusive nonsense. The message we should be sending is these kids are just fine. Instead, they're being told they were born wrong and they need to go on an experimental drug which has never been approved for this purpose. It's never been approved by the FDA. The American Academy of Pediatrics is finally, just now, starting a systematic review of all the evidence. And countries that have done this review, England, Sweden, Finland, they've all put a stop to this. Norway and Denmark had followed suit. It wasn't the politicians who stopped it, it was their medical bodies. It was their professional lifetime pediatricians after examining all the evidence. So we don't have proper regret rates because regret takes years to kick in, and this whole thing has exploded.
They opened a door
Yeah.
for people who identify with being gay because they're like, I know that something's not right with me in my body. I'm attracted to something, or I'm not identifying with like who I am. And so when they say, I'm allowing you to have this pharmaceutical that's going to change you, it opens the door from not just being gay to transgender. We've seen, so much gay activism, and now it's turned
Trans.
from all
It's
of
like
that
all
to trans.
trans, okay.
And I get that now.
Overwhelming majority growing out of their gender dysphoria after puberty. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so the one thing about growing out of it as they get older. Now you can correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken, isn't that study literally having any non-gender conforming what's the behavior? If I'm not mistaken, that study used dudes who or little boys who would play with doll houses or stuff like that, which isn't that's not the bar for starting gender affirming care.
Okay, so 12 different academic studies. They're all up on my website. There's a spreadsheet you can click on, and click on the link and it'll take you to each academic study, wherever it's published, PubMed or wherever. These aren't my studies, okay? The spreadsheet breaks it down, the desistance rate for each study and the percentage who grew up to be gay. And in every case, it's more than 80%. Some of the studies are very small. The biggest one was just 139 kids because this didn't used to affect that many. But we've seen this 3,000 or 4,000% explosion in the last decade, mostly in girls who didn't have gender dysphoria growing up, but they get into teenage years, they get into middle school, and guess what? Puberty is a hard time. Who knows what else is going on? As I mentioned before, these kids have other mental health issues going on, and autism is prevalent in about half these cases. According to the Tavistock, out of 1,038 kids that they saw there, this was the big gender clinic in England, 35% had moderate to severe autism.
I'm not sure what the autism has to do with anything.
Well, we should be asking questions. Why are we sterilizing all these autistic kids?
That's a good question.
If you have a message for people about the state of social services, the state of CPS, what would it be?
Take your children out of school. Take your children out of public schools.
And is there any advice for parents who, for whatever reason, find their children suddenly talking with CPS?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. I would say do what you need to do to get your kids back and then move out of the state of California.
Yeah.
There we go.
What is it that as a young middle school girl that now from being like gay or bi, now I want to be trans? Like I want to change my whole femininity, my everything that makes me a girl to being a boy.
So there's a long answer to this.
Yeah, there's a long answer for that.
But
It's definitely a
so-
case-to-case
What's
thing.
going on?
It's very
Thank you for your
personal.
courage.
My pleasure.
Thank you for your courage.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. So there was a woman from the Washington University Gender Clinic. Her name's Jamie Reed. She describes herself as a queer woman, married to a trans man, politically left of Bernie Sanders. She blew the whistle on all this earlier this year.
Okay.
And it felt like I was listening to myself speak because she confirmed all these things. These are kids coming straight from the psychiatric unit.
Okay.
They have terrible home lives. There might have been abuse, like whatever. There's something else going on. But we don't treat that anymore. We treat gender as though it's the source of all their other problems.
Yeah.
And right away, we take a child at their own word that they're transgender and simply affirm them.
I get that.
We don't affirm anorexia.
Totally.
We don't say, yes, sweetheart, you are overweight. Let's give you liposuction.
Yes.
But with this, we say, yes, sweetheart, you were
have
born in the
right
wrong
to
body.
Feel whatever it is that you feel.
Could you imagine if we were affirming girls with anorexia, giving them liposuction, saying, you know, you are fat. Let's get you liposuction. That sounds crazy, right?
It does.
Well, this aspect is, yes, you are a boy. Let's get you on puberty blockers.
Right.
Let's get you on cross-sex hormones.
And it's
Let's
all
cut out
based
your
on what my
breasts.
feelings,
Yeah.
like
Correct.
it's
As
just
a
like
12-year-old.
my feelings, and you're like encouraging my feeling, you know?
Why aren't we asking questions about this? Why do we think it's just okay to rush them into
So
this
are you
sterilization and mutilation?
Okay.
Is that not a reasonable question to ask? Like, why are we
You
sterilizing
can
autistic
frame it
kids?
as sterilization and mutilation. That's great, but like,
Frame
Well,
it.
that's what
Frame
it,
it.
that's what it is.
I'm not
These are the
framing it.
facts. We're not framing anything. This is not a position. That's what it is.
okay, okay. I want to get bogged down in
You want to concede that point or no?
like concede what point?
What I just said. It's sterilization.
In some cases, yeah, it can be sterilization, yeah.
Okay.
But like the framing, like the idea that like since they're autistic, you need to like have like this conservatorship over them and like decide for them what's right is in my opinion extremely false. Because like they're autistic, like they can like I feel like aside from like being extremely on the spectrum, they largely can live their own lives and largely decide what's right for them. But I also just want to get back to the point here that like I've also seen a study, and you correct me if I'm wrong on this too, that like if just one family member supports a trans member of their family's decision to transition, their rate of suicidality massively decreases, which in my opinion shows that this isn't some social contagion of people in middle school who want to switch genders just because everyone else is doing it, but rather it's an actual form of distress for them that won't maybe resolve when they grow up, because I'm sure that like
I'm happy to address this.
and let me finish here, because like I've seen in like every single story involving like trans rights, people in the comments spewing stuff about like their suicide rates. And if the suicide rates are so high, maybe it's not because of maybe the reason why we don't have like so much data about maybe the reason why so many of the people who grow up become gay and all these things is because the people who actually were trans killed themselves. Like what? Do you have like?
Okay, can I answer this?
Okay, go for it.
All right. So, I don't want to give you a hard time, but it's all propaganda. It's true that suicidality is higher. Obviously, if a kid wants to change their sex, there's something going on. The suicidality, not suicide rate, but suicidality is even higher.
Can we clarify the difference? Unless you know what that is.
No, I don't
So
know.
suicidal ideation, I want to kill myself. Suicides, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, yeah. Now
Okay.
continue.
So, yes, ideation is higher.
Mhm.
And we need to help these kids. It's not true that there's this huge epidemic of all these kids killing themselves. It's just not true. There's no evidence to support it. The only quality studies we have for suicides have been done with the adult population, the most comprehensive one at all, where no one was lost to follow-up, where these aren't self-selected participants participating in some study that the Human Rights Campaign promoted or whatever. The most quality study is out of Sweden. No one was lost to follow-up. 10 years after sex reassignment surgery with adults, suicide rates, actual suicides, were 40 times higher than the general public and 19.1 times higher than their peers when you account for people with similar mental health comorbidities. So it's not reducing suicides. All evidence we do have points to an increase. The systematic review that was done in England, and it's 90 pages long, you can look it up. Look up the Tavistock or the NHS systematic review, gender, you'll find it. It found that puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, this wasn't doing anything to improve the psychological well-being of these children. So if it's not doing that, what the heck are we doing experimenting on children? And this isn't even an experiment, because with a proper experiment, there are rules to follow. There would be children with other mental health issues that would not be included in the study in the first place.
I'm more of a naturalist type of person. Like, I think that we more need to change the structures behind what causes mental health issues and like find more natural ways of helping people with mental health and like, but at the same time, so this is why how I'm tying it back is like,
Yeah, okay.
I have these views, but I think that I think it should still be legal to have people make their own decisions. Like,
We believe that though,
yeah.
just not for children, because that's not how it is for children, right?
Mhm.
They don't get
That's
to
not how
drive.
that's how
They
it
don't
is
get
for
to
children
drink,
about
they don't get to
anything.
smoke, they don't get to get tattoos because they're kids.
With like younger teenagers, right? Like you mentioned, like the puberty blockers can lead to like if they decide to desist, because like there's also like a conflation of terms here where I'm talking about like people who go on puberty blockers generally and take gender-affirming care extremely the majority of the time do not detransition later in life. You mentioned like 50,000 people like.
Well, we don't have stats on that.
Okay, well, I mean,
The question would be, what
There
is your
is-
basis for saying that?
there's
And
no
you don't,
quality
we don't
statistics
have
on
a
that.
basis
Well,
for saying that.
If a child goes to a gender clinic and starts taking testosterone, these young girls, and then they come off, nobody knows.
well,
They're not following up with them.
Okay, you can say that. I'm not sure if that's true.
Well,
but like,
it's something for you to look up. The Academy of Medicine came out with a report last year in France, stating that it is impossible to say which of these children will see their gender dysphoria desist. But the practice in all these gender clinics is, well, that doesn't matter. They know the desistance rates, but they don't care. Because they do it to all the kids, even though most would just outgrow this. Are you telling me that for the first time in human history, we need a pharmaceutical company to help children be their true selves? Do you believe in evolution?
I do believe evolution. Yeah.
Okay, so somehow after 1 billion years of the process of natural selection, it has failed, and we need AbbVie pharmaceuticals to help children be their true selves.
That's like really dumb. Like after all these years of evolution, we still have people in wheelchairs. That's crazy. Why didn't they just become?
Those are medical conditions.
Correct, and so
Yes.
is gender dysphoria. And
Puberty is not a medical condition.
correct.
Growing up is not a medical condition.
Correct. And
This is a problem with the mind. This isn't a physical condition.
yes.
And we don't solve problems with the mind by altering the body. Do we tell an anorexic, yes, sweetheart, you are overweight, let's give you liposuction?
That's a massive like conflation of these two very different things.
Why so?
Why?
Because right.
Mental health disorder. We don't affirm
Yes.
it. Why do we affirm this one?
Because like I can pull up a study right now that somewhere in the
Sure.
ballpark of like
The people that were ahead of the United States over in Europe
yeah
they're going through all this stuff. They're all getting rid of this for
The
children,
professionals.
and there's a reason for this
Not
stuff.
the politicians, the professionals.
Right. These are medical professionals that have done comprehensive reviews on all the evidence that we have available.
I held a protest in Toronto a long time ago. A bunch of people put signs up on the telephone poles saying, "Don't police a body that doesn't belong to you. I trust children to know what's best for them." And that is the prevailing theory of this entire thing.
The frontal lobe isn't even fully developed till 23 or whatever it is. You
Yeah.
know, what kids can't.
Even later than that.
Right.
Yeah.
Kids can't even vote. You can't. You know, it's like what?
If they had the same logic when it came to like smoking cigarettes and everything, and they were like, "Yep, full on anarchy," you would at least be like, "Okay, you're an anarchist. I get it."
Right.
But it's not.
No, it's not. No, it's selective for the destruction of humanity.
Marcy Bowers admitted in a Zoom call last year, I can send you the video, I've tweeted it out many times. He said literally none of the kids who started, the boys, who started puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2, which is the beginning of puberty, it's a scientific term, as adults, they haven't been able to have an orgasm. So they're also destroying the future sexual function of these children. What 10, 11-year-old boy who's never had any experience like that, who can't even conceive of it,
okay,
how
like,
can he
I know
possibly
where you're
consent
going
to
with
throwing
this.
away his adult sexual function?
No, okay, yeah, and orgasms are great. I love them, but like let's
It's much more than that, isn't it?
Well, okay, like yes, they're great. Like what do you want me to say?
One of the
Anyway.
greatest things in life is starting a family, having
Okay,
kids
okay,
for the
yeah.
overwhelming majority of people.
Yes. Okay, and I know they're gonna talk about like families are great and you should like have sex a lot with make a bunch of kids. Anyways, let me get back to the point. Like,
Okay.
dude, like
Okay, final thoughts.
keep
Go
going.
ahead.
I just like I looked at the study and like like according to let's see, what was it? I don't know. The National Library of Health. Like, this is the first one I looked up, so it might be like Google pushing trans rice down my throat. I don't give a like the most important factors in determining positive outcomes for trans health, because you might say like, oh, we don't have any of this information, we don't have any of this like thing, we haven't done enough studies, this is too new and stuff. They said that like, and I haven't read this, so okay. I could be completely proven wrong here.
Yeah, just toss it out there, man.
At a macro level, few system strengths were
James Klug?
What's up, man?
What's up, dude?
Let's see.
Hey, appreciate all the work you do, man.
Appreciate you watching. All right, we're down to 30 seconds you got left. We got to wrap this conversation up.
No, yeah, okay.
Oh, by the way, did you answer his question if children can consent to what he just talked about?
Throwing away adult sexual function?
Throwing away adult sexual function. Can children consent to throwing that ability away? Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, no.
Yes? No?
Let me explain it. It's not like a simple answer.
It's a really simple answer. It's a really simple answer.
Yeah.
We love everybody. Like, I don't care if you want to change your gender. I don't care.
You know what?
But wait until you're 18, and I don't think the state should have to pay for it. But we shouldn't be. They're pushing it. It's a push. It's not okay.
Well, it's indoctrination.
It's an indoctrination.
Okay.
And it's confusion.
Important question. So I know James offered this right away, and we're going to honor your request. It's important people stop being anonymous.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Okay, so do you mind if we don't blur out your face?
Oh, I don't care if you blur out my face.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because people have to stop being anonymous. We got to speak up.
100%?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You just said factual stuff.
No,
and you know what? If anyone comes after you, we'll find you legal representation. So
that's all right. I mean, I didn't do my vaccine, so I'm already on the list, but...
Oh, the list. That's so lovely.
If there were evidence showing that kids who had who had puberty blockers, like, not kids, but like teenagers who had puberty blockers, if later in life there were evidence showing that they were happy with their decisions, happy with their lives, would you think that it would be okay for children to consent, or teenagers? Because, like, I agree with you. I don't think that children 0 through, like, I don't know the exact level, scientists should figure that out, like 13, 14, 15, should, like, children to that level should not be taking gender affirming care. They can socially transition and all that stuff, but they shouldn't get that.
Okay, I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
The answer is we should not ever be stopping the physical development of a child. We should not be giving them a prostate cancer drug, a drug for endometriosis, a drug used on pedophiles to chemically castrate them. We should not be chemically castrating, sterilizing, and mutilating children, period.
Yeah, full stop, probably.
That's it.
Yeah. That's a great way to frame it, but I really think that if, like, there were evidence showing, which I think there is, but I can't really pull it up right now,
all right.
that, like...
You think you're saying it's more of like a narrative, we're framing it away, but this is just the facts.
Yeah. I mean, like
right? The framing is you saying gender affirming care. That's a way of framing stuff, because you're not being honest about what you're talking about.
And let's be real, right? Like, framing it as children, the vast majority of these people are like teenagers. You could say, can teenagers consent to reversible puberty blockers? You can see how that's framed differently than children consent.
Reversible?
Yes, like we discussed earlier, if after like a half year, if you decide that you no longer want to continue on this path, you can 100% go off.
What's the percentage that are just doing like a few months on puberty blockers? It does damage.
Correct.
It's like saying, oh, doing meth once doesn't do that much damage to you. It's like, yeah, probably not. But if you continue for a while, and the overwhelming majority of people are continuing for a while, that's a problem.
End up being content with it. Like, you're saying there's not evidence.
You have no basis for saying that. It's not true.
Okay, yeah.
These 5 letters, LGBTQ, paralyzed man. No one wants to say a thing about any of it, because then there's some bigot against anti-LGBTQ.
They don't want to be politically incorrect.
But we should be able to have conversations when kids are coming to lifelong harm.
Of course.
And we need to have conversations about this more than anything.
Definitely.
So that's the mission I'm on, to start conversations, to have conversations, because when people learn the truth about what's going on, we're going to put a stop to this.
Definitely.
So
Thank you so much for everything that you do, Chris. I really appreciate you, and for the time that you spent educating me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Now I'm going to be like shaking hands with me.
A lot of young women coming up and saying that.
So glad that you do this. So glad.
It's an elite white liberal in the wild. What are your thoughts about this sign?